Los tonos verdes representan...
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. If I invite you to take your seats, our next session is going to be a fascinating fireside discussion on artificial intelligence, a topic we've all heard about, but perhaps don't fully grasp the true potential of what artificial intelligence holds. To help unpack what AI is all about, would you please give a warm welcome to the stage Mr. Robert Smith, Chairman and CEO of Vista Equity Partners. The conversation will be facilitated by a great friend of APEC, Susan Segal, the President and CEO of the Americas Society Council of the Americas. Would you please give them a very warm welcome?
So good morning to everyone. And I am delighted this morning to be able to have this conversation with Robert Smith, who has been introduced, is the founder, chairman, and everything else of Vista Partners. We're going to be speaking, a lot of people the last few days have been speaking about AI, but he's been investing in AI for the better part of 20 years before we called it AI. He has about $100 billion under management, and he's been investing in enterprise software, which has a transformative power in the tech sector. And he has clear values which work on a better future, a smarter economy, and a broader path to prosperity for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to talk this morning about the forms of generative AI, how it is playing a role in his portfolio companies. And I can think of no one better than to really talk about this than our panelist here. So let me start by this. Mm-hmm. AI has just captured the imagination of the world overnight, and that's all people talk about. But how far along are we in the cycle? And do we really have the backbone and the infrastructure to make it happen? I mean, we need energy, we need water. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and again, I want to thank the lovely people of Peru and, of course, the organizers of APEC for inviting me here to be part of this with you. It's been a wonderful experience. The people here have been kind and warm and lovely and accommodating, and I'm looking forward to coming back many, many more times. This subject of artificial intelligence and what has captivated people's attention now is called generative AI, which we'll talk a little bit about in a few minutes, is again, going to be transformative across many aspects of the global economy. The world that I get to live in is a world of enterprise software. I started my firm about 25 years ago, and I was at really the dawning of the age of utilization of compute and compute power. You know, the early days of compute, it was contained and utilized only by large corporations, governments, and universities. But as you all know, as Moore's Law kicked in and became cheaper and cheaper to distribute compute, we went from on-premise to private cloud to public cloud, which really distributed computing power globally. And across those dimensions, what became very clear was that enterprise software became the most productive tool introduced in the business economy over the last 50 years, and now is likely to be the most productive tool over the next 50, catalyzed by GenAI. Again, artificial intelligence is software, right? And it is a unique type of software that creates some unique attributes and utilized properly, create massive amounts of economic opportunity. You know, I have the good fortune of presiding over a group of of companies at Vista, and I work with a group of very talented individuals who help drive this forward. We have about 86 software companies today. We operate in 180 countries. We have over 500 million users of our software, over 70 different industries, and that informs a lot of our thinking about the utility of GenAI across our platforms. You know, in our construct, 100% of our companies are now using some GenAI and code assist and code development. Some of the ones that are more productive, we've already delivered over 1 million lines of code that have been all 100% GenAI written and developed into what we call general availability. And we're seeing productivity rates of between 10 and 30% by developer enhancement. So it has some impact there. 80% of our companies have a product in market or under development that will serve and aid their customer base. And to give you some statistics, the current group of companies, we measure the productivity of the products that we have for the customers that we have, and it's over 625%. We are seeing an inflection point when you GenAI enable products of 50, in some cases to 100% beyond that, as we're even in the first couple years and stages of development. And of course, we're delivering productivity tools across all of the portfolio companies. So to really get to the heart of your question, what we are saying, there is still some constraints in the opportunity set. Of course, you know, access to compute, and then so kind of what kind of compute do you actually need for certain applications, which we can talk about in a minute. And then the challenge that the hyperscalers and others are having is, in order to provide the compute at the scale that they deem necessary, they need power, and they need the power and transmission infrastructure to support that. That doesn't exist in all places, and so that's why you're seeing, you know, activities of, let's put our GPU data centers right next to a power plant, so we actually can eliminate one of the blockades or the constraints to us delivering power to these systems. And then you have to think about the transmission of the data, latency capabilities. In some places, you know, you have instant capability. In other places, you have to deal with other forms. And of course, you know, satellite in certain instances will be as effective as cable. But those are those dynamics that are occurring. So the massive power utilization for the way that the construct on, we call it the current construct in GPUs, is outstripping the current capacity. So the demand, at least the expectations, outstripping. So you're going to see a massive infrastructure build to support that, kind of point one. Point two, I think one of the realizations, and a lot of that's being funded, which is interesting, a lot of that's being funded by hyperscalers and sovereigns. So not many individuals have access to participate as investors in that process, and hopefully that will change. Point two, as this evolves, what has typically happened in the world of technological innovations, hardware vendors, semiconductor vendors, you know, component vendors, infrastructure capture the first couple of waves of opportunity, but typically it's the software vendors at the end that capture the vast majority of the economic rent that's created in these sort of environments. We expect that same sort of dynamic, and so we're now starting to see the green shoots of opportunity, which I know is something we'll talk about today, starting to emerge in this world as it evolves. So there are some constraints. It's going to take some years to build out capacity, but as that happens, it will start to liberate the creative opportunities in leveraging GenAI in consumer businesses and in enterprise businesses, which will actually inflect the productivity of these software tools for all businesses.
But it's going to take time.
It will take time. Building out infrastructure, scalable infrastructure, reliable infrastructure. In some cases, the power grids can't handle the support. In some cases, you don't have the transmission capacity for the data movement, right? So all of that takes time to manage and organize in ways that there's utility. And oh, by the way, there's an arms race going on, right? At the same time. And so those are the dynamics that we're seeing playing out in the investing world today. And like all things, I think there'll be an overcapacity in certain environments. In some cases, there'll be a scarcity in others. And in some cases, there will be a realization that certain types of capacity aren't necessary for the utility of how it's used. And I think that hasn't come to light quite yet. We're seeing it, but it hasn't come to light right yet in terms of how investments should be made going forward.
But this is going to actually encourage people to update power grids and ways to transmit better power, right?
It should, and I am hopeful that we are more thoughtful about it than we have been in the past. There should be very thought to ensuring that we are treating our planet much more gently in that construct. And each individual geography has their own needs. But you also have to think about what is the utility for the people and who is it actually serving. Humanity is a very important component of this. And there's a climate issue, but there's also how do you improve the condition of the humans who are being affected by these builds and by this technology and by this capability?
Are you walking into the next question, which is who are the winners and who are the losers in all of this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there will be some bifurcation. I think one of the near-term opportunity sets will, of course, be certain of and you're saying this, the silicon providers, the hardware providers will capture early economic returns, okay? And my sense is that over time, because of the competitive nature of that business, those economic returns will diminish and others will start to capture some of those economic returns. And then for certain of the infrastructure providers, I can't imagine that the returns are going to be where they are today in terms of how they're being underwritten, because I think there's going to be an overcapacity, and those will return to like bond-like returns in that space. The utility of software is because you don't have the hardware infrastructure build-out, CapEx that you have to deploy, you have the ability to inflect your returns much higher at a much faster rate. And if you have built out I'll call it sovereignty and dominion around certain areas in software, you should be able to continue to deliver ever-increasing value to the customer set. Like I said, certain of the businesses that we own today, on average, we have a 625% ROI for the products that we sell to our customers. But there will be that inflection of GenAI. You can capture some of that as the software vendors and capture, I'll call it, your fair share of that. So you should actually accelerate your growth and accelerate your profitability because the software vendors, if you manage it properly, should be delivering massive amounts of value to their customer base.
And in terms of people, what people and populations win and what populations lose?
You and I were chatting about this backstage, and I think this is one of the things that conferences like this have to bring to the forefront to discuss and to think about how you address this issue. To give you a sense, because we have 86 software companies, I like to say I have 86 laboratories, and we can deploy certain instances to test and trial productivity measures, one of which is customer service, customer support. And so every one of the companies that has some customer support function, which is pretty much all of them, we're deploying GenAI-enabled tools associated with it. Well, and everyone has different levels of success over a period of time. And one of the ones that is in the forefront of one of our companies, they are now getting a 37% deflection rate on customer support using a GenAI-enabled tool with a 98% resolution rate. Okay, from that, they're actually able to decrease the size of their customer support function by 32%. Kind of an interesting linearity, right? That's in the second generation of an instance. And the way that we are tuning that system, my expectation is next year we should be close to 60% deflection rate, if not more. And years after, depending upon the utility, 90%. So you sit back and say, well, what are the implications of that? There are 1 billion knowledge workers out there on the planet today, okay, who are managing customer support, engagement, interaction, that in essence consume about $40 trillion of salaries across the planet. Well, this will directly affect that class of workers. And so there has to be some thought to what happens, the retooling, the retraining, the repurposing of what can be a displaced class of workers. And I think those are things you're not going to see it this week, but over the next year, you're going to start to feel it, and over the next few years, it will become very evident that this is an issue that needs to be dealt with, frankly, by governments, by leaders, by policymakers as to how we're going to deal with the citizenry, humanity, as these tools become much more efficient and effective in solving problems. Some of them are task-oriented problems. Of course, there's the big problems we think that certain forms of, call it GenAI or AGI, might be able to solve that we can't solve ourselves. But those are the dynamics that I think have to be thought through and the implications evaluated as to how these should be embraced and potentially regulated or not.
Well, one of the things that you talk about is that every single one of your portfolio companies is involved in AI in one way or another. How do you encourage them to do this? I mean, how do you keep your hand on the pulse of all your companies and push them to really adopt AI and adopt it quickly?
You yell at them. No.
Good idea. Great idea.
The advantage of being a control investor, I said, what we lack in intelligence, we make up for in ownership. And so part of it is also to equip them with a system. We have a value creation unit that we drive specific KPIs across all of the portfolio companies. But you're not just doing it in absentia. We also deliver sets of tools. Okay. And so one of the tools, just to give an example, we have hackathons, okay? And some people think about hackathons in different ways. But these are just for our own companies. And in those companies, we've already had 4 of these in the last 18 months, which are GenAI focused, period. And we'll bring in our partners, which are OpenAI, Anthropic, and all of the major hyperscalers, and they work with our teams, and we develop applications, and then we grade and rank, and then we say, okay, this application has a tremendous use case, might be functional, might be for the market, and then we use that shared knowledge and capacity to drive even our smallest companies to accelerate their adoption, not just the large ones. And so that's a very unique motion. And that is something that's actually very attractive to entrepreneurs. They're saying, wow, I've got a small company. I'm only doing 10, 20, $30 million in revenues. I can't necessarily attract the sort of people to be GenAI experts, but now you have the infrastructure of one of the 4th or 5th largest enterprise software companies in the world delivering resources, capability, capacity, utilization, GPU capacity because of our partnerships with those providers into those small companies. So they should accelerate their progress, which is why we're able to do it across all of our companies.
And you talked about centers of excellence. Talk about how centers of excellence fit into this model.
Yeah, we have now 43 centers of excellence around the world, and many of our investors really embrace the concept with us because we are able to, in a conference like this, to deploy capacity, development capacity in countries that may not necessarily have the ecosystem to support it. Part of what we do is, our average company grows about 20% in headcount from the time which we buy the company to the time which we sell it. And so
Which is what time frame usually?
Well, 4.7 years is the average, okay. But again, it's an average. So in that period of time, what we're looking to do is build out the capabilities of the people, and sometimes you may have tapped out what I'll call the resources in a specific market where the company was started. I always like to say, all software companies kind of start small, right? Every one of them started off with 2, 3, 4, 5 people sitting around a room and say, oh, we wrote some code, we could solve this problem. Then one day later, they're at 100 people, then 1,000 people, and then 5,000 people, then you're Microsoft type size, right? But remember, that started with as a small company. But as you need to build out, talent and capability in different places. And so we have pioneered this kind of center of excellence model where we'll go find a high quality group of citizens, people who we think can actually be great developers or support people or whatever it might be, and install an infrastructure to not only find but develop and train them, and then they will support specific companies in our ecosystem. And we find that actually creates its own little mini ecosystem that spurs entrepreneurship and add-on opportunities and investments. So that's actually been a very effective motion for us over the last 25 years. And
so we are in Peru, so I have to touch on Latin America, APEC countries. Do you have any centers of excellence?
Oh, we do, of course. I think I want to say we have 9 or 10 centers of excellence throughout LATAM generally, and we chatted about this. Certain of those centers of excellence in development are actually performing as high as some of our best centers of excellence in the U.S. So on parity, smart people, capable people looking for access to opportunity. And in putting that infrastructure in place, we enable that opportunity to manifest in those environments. So again, we encourage government leaders to give us a call and say, hey, listen, we would like to engage on centers of excellence. And we literally review this every month. Where are we going to build the next center of excellence? We have 4 companies we've announced we're going to buy. Each one of them has a center of excellence plan, and now we're determining, well, where do we place that and where do we put it?
Before we close, because we have 1 minute and 33 seconds left, I would like to ask you one question. When we were talking, you talked about your sports company. Yeah. Can you, in one little capsule, talk about this, because it is so cool?
Yeah, it's interesting. So an important part of leveraging GenAI effectively as a software business, and I tell our investors this all the time, you have to have sovereignty and dominion over the data sets and the workflows in order for it to be a sustainable business going forward. If you don't have the sovereignty and dominion over those data sets, it's likely there's no reason for that company to exist over time. Okay, because ultimately these GenAI tools and the agents will be able to collect all of that materials, learn, and then deliver that into the environments that were once your customers. So just keep that in mind. But we have businesses, and what we focus on is that one of our companies, Stats Perform, 6.5 petabytes of sports data. Okay, that's 10 times more than anyone else in the marketplace. We're able to, our plan is from what we see over the next 4 years, we'll get over to 175 petabytes of sports data that we uniquely capture because we invested 10 years ago in developing GenAI agents for onboarding this sports data. It's a magnificent, what I call expression of how you take an analog event, sports, movement of people, typically, digitize it, and then utilize it in multiple dimensions. Some of it is just reporting, what happened in the game and what level. Sometimes it is actually the modeling of it in a game because you want certain players in a video game to act and have the same sort of performance as the actual player. In some cases, it is actually informing how various agents are using it for their sports books, and in some cases, it is how to utilize it to now do simulations in different environments. So GenAI, because we made in early investments 10 years in that company, has enabled a massive expansion of the addressable market for that company. And now the activity is how do we make sure we capture our fair share of what we've been able to create through those investments. But thank you for asking about that.
No, well, thank you very much for being with us. I would like to thank the organizers of APEC CEO Forum. It's just been amazing. I want to thank you, Robert, for being with us today. And you asked that we leave a question for all of you. So I will come back to the statistics that you talked about. 1 billion knowledge workers, $40 trillion of spend. And as we look at AI in the future, the question is, what do we think is the job of the future? How are we going to create employment of the future and prosperity for the planet? Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much to Mr. Smith and Susan. If we can invite you, Susan, hang on. Can we grab you just for a very quick photo, please? Thank you so much. We invite you to stand in the middle of the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Smith and Susan Segal. Please give another